And then we talk about how it applies to our life and our inner life, outer life, the world. And we're particularly in the phase or the section of these slogans where they're very much geared towards helping us bring our practice into our life, in the world, not just what to contemplate on the meditation cushion, but how to work with challenges that we encounter in our life. So it tends to be a juicy, often they're quite interesting and revealing and inspiring in certain ways. So this one is so interesting. In the printout that you have, just so you know, there are many different translations of these slogans. People have been translating them for decades, and different translators have slightly different angles on the translation. So I'm going to offer up two, and it's just an interesting difference, not that important, but the one that you have is, don't transfer the ox load to the cow. Don't transfer the ox's load to the cow. Another one that I found that is actually more correct. I do read and translate Tibetan, and so I do like to check the root text. And it's not that Chogyam Trungpa didn't translate it correctly in this original one that you have. It's just that he was probably trying to simplify it for the American audience, for the Western audience. But the real translation is actually more specific. Do not transfer the Zo's load onto the ox. Zo is a Tibetan, it's a breed of animal that is a combination of the yak. All of us probably have heard of the yak, the beautiful big, they're kind of like bulls but different with long-haired yak, and the cow. And so this breed, this combination or hybrid of the yak and the cow is a cherished animal in Tibetan culture because they produce a lot more milk. And they really rely on milk, butter, yogurt. It's one of their main staples. In the land of snows, very high altitude, and there's not a lot of vegetables, there aren't a lot of grains that grow. Their diet mainly consists of meat, dairy, and like roasted barley flour, and some nettles and some vegetables, depending on what they can get where they are in the country. So the Zo is a very cherished, beloved animal. Like Dzigar Kongtrul Rinpoche said in his commentary that if you're a Tibetan family and you owned 5 Zos, you were considered wealthy. And if you lost one, it was a big deal. It's difficult to replace. Whereas if you have some oxes, they're not as valuable. They're not as strong, and they're not as valuable because they don't produce the kind of milk that the Zos do. So this slogan, do not transfer the Zo's load onto the ox. I like this translation. So what would you think? What would you think the analogy is? I'm going to throw it out to you now before I start kind of spoon-feeding this commentary to you. If the Zo is the cherished, the beloved, the highly revered thing or animal, and the ox is just kind of, it's there, it has some benefit but not so important. What do you think the analogy is? What do you know, based on what we've been doing in the slogans, where we're trying to cultivate bodhicitta, the spirit of awakening, we're trying to diminish our habitual patterns and our neuroses and all the things that cause suffering, and we're trying to cultivate qualities of wisdom and compassion and empathy. Where do you think this is going? Yes?
Maybe don't have unrealistic expectations of others, or
good.
Put too much expectation.
Yes, very good. You're on it. You're on to it. There's a little more, but you're on the scent. You're on the trail. So you said, tell me your name again?
Funny.
Funny said, maybe don't have too much expectation or put too much on to others. Good. Anyone else? Yes.
Don't transfer the obligations of the kindly prince to the peasant.
Good, Arnie. I like that. Don't transfer the obligations of the kindly prince to the peasant. So who is the kindly prince? Who is the Zo? Who, what do we cherish more than anything? Ourselves. You got it, Eva. Ourselves, right? We are the Zo. And who or what is the ox? You were onto it. Everybody else. Everybody else. So there are a lot of different commentaries, and I like to refer to a bunch of different books and see what angles people are coming from. And in this particular one, I really enjoyed Dzigar Kongtrul Rinpoche's commentary, because I was reading Western commentaries, and they don't really have the full appreciation of how important the Zo is. But he does, because he was born and raised in Tibet, and he understands. So he had a beautiful commentary on this, saying, with the Zo is the analogy for our self-cherishing. We tend to cherish ourselves above all else. And our lesser enlightened side, it does, maybe most of us in this room don't tend to do this in a compulsive or, crazy kind of out of balance way, but we might find subtle ways that we might, maybe, transfer or unload our responsibility onto others. Whether it be like actually physically, like, oh honey, I don't want to, can you do the laundry? Yeah, I don't want to do the laundry, the garbage. I'm always asking my husband, my back hurts, can you take the laundry? Can you do that? That doesn't mean that I'm like shirking my responsibilities, but I am unloading part of. It's both of our obligations, it's not just mine. Jeez, falling into the trap of the wife, like break out of that. Anyway, so as if it was my load. Anyway, laundry load, do the load of laundry. So, but what I'm interested in is the more subtle things. Like, say, where do we not take responsibility in our life? This is more of the inner, In Dharma, we talk about the outer, the inner, and the secret level of things. So the outer is like, oh, can you go get me a beer? I don't want to get up out of the easy chair. Can you go to work? I don't want to work. Can you go to work and make the money? That's kind of the outer level. Asking others to do things for us, take care of us in ways when we really know we should take care of ourselves. But then you have the inner level, which is maybe our thinking, like blaming other people for things that we've done. Not being able to say, okay, I made a mistake, I'm sorry. But instead, really honestly look at yourself. Are there any little sneaky, clever ways that you transfer the load from the Zo to the ox in your life? Do you know people who do that? Yeah, it's easier to see. Some people have a really hard time admitting that they made a mistake. And one thing that Dzigar Kongtrul was saying is it's actually that when we can admit that we've made a mistake and say, I'm sorry, meaning take responsibility for our load, our self-confidence gets stronger. We know who we are. We know that we're strong enough to be able to say, I made a mistake. Doesn't mean I'm all bad. Just a part of me was bad. Just a part of me made a mistake. I'm not all bad, right? So I'm sorry, but I'm still here. I didn't die. I admitted I've made a mistake. Some people, some of us have a hard time doing that, but the more we can do that, the easier it gets, and we realize that's actually the higher road, is to just take the blame. And that's one of the most famous slogans. I mean, if you really want to take this even further, as Dzigar Kongtrul says at the end of his commentary, he said, who knows, maybe one day you'll be able to do what they say in one of the earlier Lojong slogans, which is to take all blame onto yourself and offer all success to others. That's the advanced track. That's the advanced PhD level Lojong practitioner right there. You can't do that right. Most people can't do that right away. You have to warm up to it. I'm sorry. Maybe I misunderstood you. Maybe I wasn't clear, right? I'm willing to say that. I'm willing to hold that and model that, actually, to show people that's okay. I don't always have to be right.
I have
Yes.
something that my wife and I are always trying to work out, which is...
Can you speak up a bit so everybody can
My wife
hear
and I
you?
are always trying to work out, which is saying I'm sorry, but then, the other day she left the house and she was kind of snippety, so she called me shortly after that and said, I'm sorry I was snippety, but sometimes you are so unreliable that it makes me snippety. So it goes back and forth.
Yeah, how did that feel? How did it feel when she said that to you?
Oh, I didn't like that.
No, because
That's not really an apology.
she needs to know that you can't say but in there. You cannot put the but in there.
I do the same thing to her, though, sometimes. So
you need to bring her to class.
Yes.
I'm sure she's wonderful like
She
you.
is.
I know, it's hard to learn how to communicate. And relationship is the hardest place to do this stuff. It's so hard to admit that you're wrong. Because really, very often you're not wrong. I'm not wrong. You're wrong. Yeah.
I'm thinking about the idea of staying in your own lane and
Uh-huh.
what is your responsibility, which is also not taking on unnecessarily other people's responsibility, so almost like vice versa. And I think that
Yes.
particularly people, socialized female, are
Yes.
sensitive and kind of almost sort of like make other people, especially male people's problems, like their
Good.
problems.
Good.
So I think it can go both ways.
I'm so glad you brought that up.
And maybe the dry hole blames into one, I think that's why I've had problems wrapping my mind around that, because I'm I think people actually do that to, in a kind of, if you jump to that, it's like a spiritual bypass that ends up being harmful, because it's kind of, they can collapse, people can collapse into themselves.
Exactly. That's why it's a more advanced, it's something that you only should ask of yourself when you really have a strong ego structure and you really know what you're doing with that, and that it doesn't collapse you into it. It's a really good point that you're making, and especially it's true. It's sometimes, I mean, other women might feel the same way, but men might have noticed this too. Sometimes I feel like these teachings, they really were taught by men, for men. And women have a natural capacity for compassion. It's actually not as hard because of their nurturing nature. Usually, I'm not saying everybody's the same, and we can't always generalize, but because of the capacity to have children and nurse and being the mother, there's a kind of, even the Buddhists will say, generate compassion like a mother for her child. They always use the example of a mother. And so sometimes I think, the tonglen, it's easy for me, I don't have to practice this. Maybe I should practice something else, like being strong and firm. But the first point you made is very good, and I was hoping we would get to this, so I'm glad you're going right to, it's kind of like you're getting right to the flip side of it, which is to not take on the other person's load. Yeah. Not take on the other zone, not be the ox. Maybe. The poor ox.
Or take on the ox's load, not to take on the ox's load.
So I guess I didn't finish this little commentary. So what not take on the ox's load. Good. Not take on the ox's load. So in Tibet, when for many Tibetans, not all, but many are nomadic, right? So they'll stay in a certain area and then it's time to go, and they'll go somewhere else as the seasons change. So when it's time to move on, they will pack their zos or their oxes with their supplies. And so what Zigor Kongtrul was explaining was that oftentimes people will put more loads on the oxes so that they, because they don't want to hurt their zos because they're so precious. So they'll put the loads on the oxes, and they will be less concerned if it hurts the ox. So I just wanted to finish that, because maybe it was just obvious, but I don't think I had finished that part of the kind of anthropological story of where this Lojong slogan comes from. So yeah, being mindful of noticing if you tend to take on other stuff that you don't need to take on. Very important as well. That, it might be like the secret level, right? The more deeper level. Also, I was thinking the secret level, if you're going to go outer, inner, and then secret level of this, is also like the interplay with our mind. You know, when in deep meditation, you can sense our pattern. We can sense our patterns a little bit more clearly, or a lot more clearly. And where in my internal dynamic do I move away from my center? Where am I blaming or avoiding or trying to, avoid taking full ownership and responsibility for my own awakening, so to speak? You know, in shamatha practice, when we're trying to attend to the breath, it's so interesting what we see. It's almost like the mind will do anything, but it will devise all sorts of tricks and clever strategies to avoid essentially dying. Because what's happening is that the small self needs to die to the bigger self in order for you to really wake up. It's like the small self is this ego structure, like a shell. And it needs to crack open and ultimately kind of dissolve and absorb into the mother ocean of your true being, right? So most of our life we go through our experiences, we think of, oh, we're that shell. And then through practice we realize, oh, we're not just that shell. That's just a superficial thing. That's why I've been so unsatisfied in my life, because I've just been identifying with this shell, this smaller sense of a constructed self. So dropping deeper into that, we feel into our true nature, then that dissolves and in a sense is integrated into the bigger vast ocean of who we are. But what happens is the small sense of self, the ego structure, senses its imminent demise. One of my teachers says, things don't end well for the separate self. It will die. That separate self has to die in order for something greater to come. It's like the metamorphosis of the caterpillar into the butterfly, right? And so it will do anything possible to avoid that death until you realize, oh, that's a game that's being played. I don't have to believe that, and I don't have to be so afraid of that death, because when I die, it's actually very blissful. Like, actually, the death is better than anything you've ever experienced. Chogyam Trungpa says, when this process starts to unfold, sometimes you might feel like you're falling. And then a bunch of unbelievable fear comes over you. It's like, have you had the falling dream where you're falling? Because you think you're going to hit smack bottom and die. But Chogyam Trungpa says, as you're falling, it's like that grasping of the separate self is panicking because it's going to die, it's going to die. And then as it starts to break open and release, it realizes, oh my God, it can fly in this space. And that there is no bottom. You realize there's no bottom. That you're not going to die. That you're just awakening to your true self. It can be very terrifying. But what the meditative process is, going through that terror, like the Dalai Lama says, I go through the birth and death visual. He visualizes through his own sadhana or meditative practice, his own dissolution and reemergence a few times every day. So he is preparing for the dying process in his meditation, so that when he dies, he will die well, and he can take advantage or profit from the subtle mind. I believe it said that when your physical body dies and the energy body is released, the mental body, it's called the lung sem, which means the prana body or the pranic mind, leaves the support of this physical body. We have 8 times more psychic capacity to see things, to realize things, to clear karma, and then to choose our next birth, if you believe in reincarnation. And if you don't, it doesn't matter. Maybe you choose to go to a wonderful heaven realm of your choice, or you just merge with God, or whatever you like to call that. So meditation is nothing less than preparation for your own grand finale. So the better you get at meditating, the less fear you will have of dying. Because you'll know how to merge with the larger ocean of your awareness. Because that's exactly what you get to do when you die. Small self, no, the fabrications die away. So how did we get here from don't... This is my favorite topic, actually, that's why we're here. It's do not transfer the Zo's load to the ox. So I want to hear from you. Yeah.
This really just makes me think a lot of like codependence in relationships, and sort of the weight and the loads that you put on. I just recently got out of a very codependent relationship, and there's a lot of untangling of these loads that we put on each other, and just sort of like coming to realize, like, wow, like I derive so much of my self-worth from you, and like you got so much of the sense of security from me, and sort of like being able to look at those independently now is just like, I love when the practice, like when we go over like totally like aligns with what's happening in my life, because it's just such a freeing feeling to sort of have all these revelations, like, oh my God, like I'm totally taking this load on from you, and I'm giving this to you, and like I want mine back, you can have yours back, and wow, like I feel so much more free and complete, you know? And it's just like such a, this is exactly what I needed to read here this week.
That's great. Thank you. And congratulations.
Thanks.
That makes me think of the story of the acrobat and the disciple. I don't know if that's commonly known.
Please tell it.
It's I wish I could actually tell the story as the fable or the story that it really is, but it's one where there's an acrobat who takes a disciple to a marketplace every day, and they practice balance. And so the acrobat puts a bamboo pole on his head, and the disciple climbs the pole, and they got a big following, and they started to earn money from it. And so at one point, I think if I can get this right, so the acrobat tells the disciple that they have to look out for each other and take care of each other. So they can continue to go to the marketplace every day. And so the disciple turns to the acrobat and tells him, no, you actually have it wrong. I have to climb the pole all on my own, and the only thing that will allow me to do that is by myself, by taking care of myself. And you actually have to just take care of yourself by mindfully balancing the pole. And if we both do that, then we both have the chance to prosper and succeed together. And that's the story.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. I think that's really applicable in relationship, intimate relationship too, right? Making sure to take care, be mindful of your own positioning and balance so that you could then be a good support and partner, or be present fully for the other without losing yourself. That seems like the moral of the story, right? Is that what you were feeling?
Yeah. It's just taking care of your... Because it's something, that story stuck with me, because I've always wondered if there's actually teachings about not taking on other people's loads. I have a tendency to do that, and I actually, that's something that I do. As an adult, I have to try to reel that in. I've read probably, I don't know, most of the codependency books, but still I really have this desire to help people with their problems, and I get buried by it. So it's been something that I've struggled with, and that story stuck with me.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you. This might be helpful, especially if you work it in the reverse. Tell me your name again. What's your name again? I'm sorry. Elizabeth said, not just being aware of transferring your load to other people or things, but noticing when somebody else is trying to do that, or unintentionally doing that to you. And then I think that this is the other thing that was so beautiful about this is Dzigar Kongtrul was saying that that when we do that, when we take responsibility and are able to really know who we are and take responsibility for who we are and not try to kind of leak that out or get other people to do things for us in that sense, and vice versa, not taking on too much. But by making, I can't read my own writing. We build our own self-confidence. That's what I was getting to earlier. That we build our own self-confidence even when we've done something wrong. Right? So even if we were wrong, by admitting that we're wrong and saying I'm sorry or acknowledging, look, I have a boundary here and I need to respect that, then we build our own self-confidence and our sense of who we are and what our boundaries are. He said on the other side, by avoiding taking responsibility, we become weaker and we become more and more dependent on others. This is interesting. We become more and more dependent on others. I mean, if I'm always asking my husband to get me my beer, I grow more and more dependent on him, right? It's like we're not training up that muscle anymore of taking responsibility for who we are, and we start relying maybe too much, becoming too dependent on others. And he said, as a Lojong practitioner, we need to become conscious of the ways we unload our burden onto others. And then I would add the way we take on others' loads. We do this by being willing to bring difficult situations onto the path. Be willing to say, you know what, I've given enough, now I need to recuperate. I can't give any more right now. Or being willing to tell somebody, look, you know, I don't feel comfortable with the way that you're demanding so much of me, or you're asking me always to get your beer. You know, like being able to stand up for yourself rather than avoiding things. And then also he's advocating us to really practice tonglen for not only ourselves, like what we did in the meditation practice, practicing tonglen for ourselves in these moments. Maybe you can breathe in some of these feelings of like, why am I always... Is there a sense of what is that tender feeling underneath that need to always help? And breathe that in and let it come home to the heart, and then breathe out some kind of intuitive healing or remedy to that. Well, if that weren't there, what would you like to cultivate? What would you like to cultivate in response to that? Maybe weakness or aspect of ourselves that we aren't as comfortable with. And then also, through extension, then doing the tonglen with the other person. Maybe we have somebody in our life who is demanding, or in this context I would say maybe needy. You know, they say in the Tibetan and the Buddhist kind of mythology of the hell realms, there's a hell realm called the hungry ghosts. Do you guys know about this? The hungry, and they're all metaphors for, you know, we could just look on our world and see plenty of hungry ghosts, people or animals or energies that consume, but never feel satisfied. The image is that of a being, like a hell realm being with a really large mouth and a very thin throat, the size of a needle. And then the belly is very large and always hungry. So there's this desire to consume, but then there's never a sense of satisfaction because it can't get totally full. Doesn't that seem like our consumer mentality, our society? So maybe we know people in the world like that, and then we can practice tonglen with them instead of like shaming them or being like, hey, come on, get with it, you know. Breathe in their hungry ghosts, their neediness, whatever that is. Breathe out the healing and remedy. Offer that. Becoming a Lojong practitioner means that you're trying to be wakeful to your automatic responses. What is my knee-jerk reaction to that person? Judgment, anger, resentment, and check it. Oh, I'm doing that. What could I do instead? Maybe I could breathe in their suffering and breathe out and offer satisfaction and joy and loving kindness. Yes?
what it drove to me was a lot of people say, you make me feel whatever that feeling, that negative feeling is, and trying to check yourself and say, wait,
Good.
I feel this way because, not you make me feel. And
Great.
not transferring that to them.
Beautiful. Thank you. Yeah, really, that's a good point. I'm just realizing that we're at 9 o'clock already, so, and it's getting cold in here. So we should probably, let's just take a moment now to let this teaching drop in and drop into our heart and really take root in us in some way. And so maybe even making an aspiration to contemplate this, bring it more into your life throughout the week, and trying to be awake to areas where you may transfer the load or accept a load that you may not want to accept. And instead practice tonglen with the breath and the heart. Thank you.